Before we start, just a quick reminder to hit that subscribe button. Only 2% are subscribed at 1,000 subscribers. I'll be posting a special video. I ripped the headset off his face mid-motion. He staggered and grabbed air. A gasp leaked from the speakers, then a giggle cut out. My pulse kicked hard against my throat. I was already past the point of asking nicely. I'm Lena, 31, already tired of being reasonable. He blinked fast and cupped the mic like it mattered. The room felt small because his eyes kept sliding. Something on the monitor flashed and died. I reached for the keyboard and he blocked with his wrist. Pause. My voice came out flat and cold. He laughed once like it might reset me. A notification chimed and lit the corner. His jaw tightened while his thumb hovered. I stepped closer and he stepped back. Who's in there with you? My finger tapped the desk twice. The client reconnected without my help. A chat line crawled up and thanked him for earlier. His breath shortened like he had run stairs. I yanked the cable and the screen glitched. Audio bled through for 1 second. A woman asked if he wanted the same room. He reached for the power button and missed. That 1 second felt like a door left open. He tried for a smile that never landed. It's just a game. He rubbed his temple and kept his body between me and the chair. Another alert blinked, private invite pending. My hands were already moving. I clicked accept before he could block me. The headset wasn't needed for the desktop view. A menu popped with locked rooms and crown icons. One label read couples tier. My stomach braced for impact. He lunged and I slid the mouse away. Stop! His voice broke on the edge. The invite timer ticked down like a dare. I hit join with the last second still dangling. The screen loaded a corridor with avatars lined up. A mod avatar waved and typed welcome back. A tip counter rolled like a slot. I scanned the names for anything familiar. One username matched the bank memo format almost perfectly. Heat prickled my neck because that meant planning. He killed the monitor and the room went dark. We're done. His hands trembled as he unplugged cables. I switched on my phone flashlight and watched his face. He looked young in the worst way. I felt older than 31 by miles. Open the purchase history? I kept the light steady on his knuckles. He swallowed hard and stared at the floor. Silence stretched until I heard the fridge hum. He unlocked the account with a twitch. Lines of microcharges stacked in neat rows. I didn't count them. I counted the gaps where he deleted notes. He watched me catch each gap and flinched. A new message bubbled on the corner of the login page. Miss you already. The ellipsis hit like a glove. How long? I kept my voice measured to avoid screaming. He rubbed his lip and looked at the door. Not long. The lie clanged between us. I realized I had not seen his eyes in minutes. I took the headset and dropped it into the trash. He surged forward and stopped himself with a shake. We stared at the bin like it breathed. The foam creaked under its own weight. I did not bend to pick it up. Bathroom, I pointed because I wanted distance. He hesitated like the word meant judgment. Wash your face and think. My hand steadied while the sink ran. Behind the door, a muffled ping kept going. I moved to the desk and opened email. 2 receipts waited with the same creator tag. The sender line had a heart and a crown. My throat went dry, but my hands stayed calm. I took screenshots because I knew I'd need proof. He came back with wet hair and empty eyes. He saw the phone in my hand and froze. We talk now or I call my sister. His shoulders sank like a tent collapsing. He nodded once and that was the first honest thing. I want truth and I want it fast. I set the phone down and watched him. He opened his mouth, then shut it, then opened again. It's stress. He reached for me and stopped when I didn't move. I reached past him and pressed the power button. The screen flared alive with a cued message. Same time tomorrow. Same room. The cursor blinked like a metronome. I felt something inside me switch from fear to decision. Delete it. He dragged the window to the corner and stalled. His fingers hovered over the confirm button. He looked at me instead of the screen. I didn't blink. His hand dropped and the invite vanished. The silence that followed wasn't peace. It was a countdown I could hear between heartbeats. He rubbed his wrist and stared at the trash can. I kept standing with my phone recording the stillness. We both understood the avalanche had only started. I took the power cord and slid it into my pocket. He watched my hands like they held a fuse. We're offline tonight. My voice carried just enough threat. He nodded once, but his eyes kept counting exits. I set a frying pan on the stove and turned the dial. Eat with me? He pulled a chair and tapped out a nervous rhythm. My phone faced the table with the camera black. I waited for the first shake in his knee. His watch buzzed and he palmed the screen fast. Work thing, he tried to SHR. Ugh, that didn't fit. I raised an eyebrow and kept stirring. The watch hummed again like a moth against glass. I held mine out and did not blink. He placed the watch on my palm and leaned back. A lock screen notification previewed a username with a star. New token tier unlocked tonight. I kept my face still while my pulse jumped. He reached for water and knocked the glass. Liquid ran along the edge and dripped steady. He cursed under his breath while I wiped slow. We'll play fair? I reached for his phone and set it next to the watch. He swallowed and rubbed his jaw. Unlock both. He stared at the stove like it might catch fire. I did not move until his thumb did. I opened one app and found a bare profile. No friends, no history. The subscriptions showed a fresh trial starting today. Another icon hid behind a folder labeled Utilities, a private wallet linked to a burner email. I felt the room tilt, then steady. He traced a line on the table with a nail. You watch me like I'm a criminal. I breathed once and let that sit. You built a second door. I copied the wallet address and saved it under groceries. He saw the name and flinched hard. You don't get to be clever. My voice came out softer and colder. He looked smaller in that moment and angrier too. Eat. I set a plate in front of him and pushed a fork. He took one bite and checked the watch without touching it. Muscle memory betrayed him at every turn. I filed that away for later. The stove clicked and I killed the flame. Go shower. He stalled in the doorway and glanced at the counter. The watch, the phone, and the folded napkin lay in a row. He left them like they burned. Water started. I collected everything and opened the laptop. I logged into our bank and searched recent vendors. A string of charges routed through a gift card hub. New method, new mask. The shower cut off and the door creaked. I closed the browser and slid the laptop aside. He came out toweling his hair and froze at my face. We need a plan tonight. He nodded, but his pupils flickered. 2 hours together without screens. I set an egg timer in the center. He laughed once without humor. After that, we talk next steps. He rubbed his wrist and looked at the hallway like it led to oxygen. We played cards because conversation would detonate. He misdealt twice and cursed at his hands. At the 10-minute mark, the timer tick felt louder. At the 30-minute mark, he scratched at his neck. His demeanor shifted at minute 50. He sat straighter and smiled on purpose. This is nice. He glanced at the timer like it owed him. I matched his smile and kept score. When the timer rang, he sprang up too quick. Bathroom. He left his phone by accident on the table. The lock held for a second, then opened with his face. A banner popped from the top with a key icon. I tapped it and a hidden messenger slid into view. Threads stacked with hearts and fire emojis. One name had a crown and a padlock. The latest message read, private link rotates hourly. He stepped back into the doorway and froze. My thumb hovered over the call button. Come here. He did and stopped just out of reach. I tilted the screen so he could read the header. Delete all of it. His jaw worked while his hands balled. It's not what it looks like. He tried to smirk, but his mouth shook. I tapped the crown chat and opened the gallery. Short clips loaded with countdown overlays. His alias sat in the top corner like a stamp. I scrolled to a tip leaderboard and found his avatar at number 9. He grabbed the chair and held on. You told me you removed the app. I watched his throat move with a hard swallow. I moved accounts. The truth slipped out and hung there. I hated that honesty looked like relief. New rule. I slid the phone back to him. You block this tonight and you show me proof. He stared at the screen and pulled in a breath. Fine. He tapped through settings with jerky precision. I watched for hesitation and found it when the password prompt appeared. He typed slowly, then paused on the last character. He looked up like a kid caught with matches. I stayed silent and waited for the burn. He confirmed the block and handed me the device. I tried the link and met a dead wall. For a second, the room eased around us. Then the watch buzzed on the counter with a new code. He stared at it like a lifeline. I stared at him like a judge. If you touch that, we sleep apart. He backed away and shoved his hands into his pockets. The code flashed again with a 1-minute timer. I picked up the watch and scrolled to notifications. A toggle sat buried under health settings with app mirroring. I turned it off and tossed the watch onto the couch. He followed it with his eyes and then me with fear. We set a checkpoint? I opened the Notes app and typed clear conditions. No private rooms, no hidden wallets, weekly reports. He read each line and nodded without lifting his gaze. He signed with shaky letters like a contract. Tomorrow I call. A counselor? I tapped save and locked the phone. He bristled and then sagged. Do that. The clock over the stove clicked to the next minute. Something heavy moved across my chest and settled. We cleaned the table in silence and took separate breaths. He hovered near me, then stopped himself like he remembered a fence. I want to fix this. His voice came low and raw. I wanted to believe more than I wanted sleep. That night I placed the phone in a drawer and kept the key. He stared at the drawer and then turned away. The apartment felt like a ceasefire with landmines. I curled on my side and listened for footsteps. At 3, a faint tap woke me, a soft scrape near the dresser. I held my breath and waited for the next sound. The floorboard near the door creaked once and went still. I rose and found him in the hallway with his head down. His hands were empty, but his eyes gave him away. Back to bed. I kept my tone even and unflinching. He turned without arguing, and that scared me. I lay awake until morning and counted choices. My resolve shifted from reaction to plan. I knew this was not the last ambush. I also knew the next move would be mine. I trailed him from the stairwell with laces half tied. He jogged past the corner store without looking back. No gym clothes, no bag, just a fast walk that screamed purpose. I kept 10 paces and counted crosswalks like moves on a board. He cut into a market and headed for the kiosk. I watched through the window while he bought scratch cards with cash. He crumpled the sleeve and tossed it near the bin. I palmed the scrap before it landed and slid it into my pocket. He ducked into a shared workspace on the next block. I took a seat near the door and angled my screen. His shoulders loosened as he punched in the codes. Relief softened his face in a way I used to cause. I swallowed that sting and hit record. A flyer on the wall caught my eye because of one word. Showcase, tonight only, special access for top supporters. My stomach flipped once, then settled into strategy. He checked the time and stood like he'd stolen something. I beat him home by 2 minutes and started the coffee. He walked in with flushed cheeks and practiced breath. Good run. He reached for a glass and fumbled the cabinet. I placed the crumpled sleeve on the counter like a trap. His eyes flicked down then up. Those are for a draw. He tried a grin that slipped. I unfolded the paper and showed the barcode. Vendor name matched the charges from last week. The pause between us hummed like a live wire. Put them on the table? I kept my voice measured and steady. He did and pulled his hands back like they burned. We agreed no more secret methods. He shifted his weight and stared at his socks. I let the silence build until he blinked first. I called the bank with the line on speaker. Purchase blocks went in under merchant category codes. The rep confirmed restrictions in under a minute. Effective now? I ended the call and met his stare. He knew the walls were moving. He grabbed his jacket and muttered something about support group. I checked the event app and found the showcase venue. Same hour, same neighborhood. A list of aliases scrolled under VIP. His handle sat in the middle like a confession. I arrived before doors opened and joined a side queue. Staff checked wrists and scanned codes. A banner promised live interactions and bonus tiers. I watched the entry desk print badges with usernames instead of names. He appeared 3 people behind me and froze. Our eyes locked and everything else fell away. Walk outside with me. I stepped left toward the curb. He stayed rooted as a runner waved him forward. Pick now. I pointed to the street, then to the archway. He looked past me at the stage lights pulsing inside. A staffer lifted a lanyard and called his alias across the crowd. He flinched like it was his actual name. I reached for the check-in sheet and took a photo fast. The column beside his alias read backroom session at 1930. A number I recognized sat under payment token. My breath came slow but iron. He knew I had the link. Come with me or go through? My chest felt hollow and firm at once. He rubbed his forehead and took half a step my way. A shout came from the doorway. The backroom slot is closing. He darted left and disappeared into the flow. My throat tightened but my spine did not bend. I opened a ride app and texted my sister one sentence. Pickup is now. On the way home, my phone buzzed with a bank alert. Attempted charge declined at Event Services. Another ping hit with a second attempt. I stared at the screen until the buzzing stopped. I was done playing defense. I walked back into the venue alone and kept my jaw locked. A staffer lifted a hand to stop me. I flashed the badge photo on my screen and stepped sideways. The line surged and carried me through the archway. I headed for the corridor with the backroom sign and didn't slow. The guard blocked the door with one boot angle. Ed, member list. I held up the check-in shot with his alias circled. The guard frowned, then turned to scan the tablet. A green tick flashed next to his fake name and the door clicked. I entered a narrow hallway that smelled like nerves and spray. A curtain swayed at the end like someone just rushed through. Voices lifted in bursts followed by electronic chimes. I took one breath and pulled the curtain wide. He stood 10 feet away with a lanyard and a wide stare. His hands were mid-gesture toward a tablet. My phone rose between us like a shield. Walk with me now. He glanced past me at the host table where a woman in sequins checked totals. A timer over her shoulder counted down his slot. He didn't move. I stepped closer and whispered into his ear. Bank declined you twice. His nostrils flared and color drained from his cheeks. The host waved him forward with a bright grin. He reached for the lanyard like it could hide him. I grabbed the plastic and snapped it off. The room went quiet at the noise. The host's smile fell and her eyes sharpened. Sir, choose your station. I placed the torn badge on the counter and held her gaze. He's done choosing here. Security approached from the side with heavy steps. I raised my phone and started recording. He isn't allowed to purchase here. I pointed to the alias on the schedule and my saved receipt list. The guard hesitated because the lens made everyone careful. The host shifted to pleasant and professional. We can process a refund if there is an error. She reached under the table for a clipboard. I nodded and slid the bank app into view. Refund to this card right now. Her fingers stilled at the bold red declines. She looked at him, then at me, then at the guard. We can ban the account for violating policy. She typed rapidly and the leaderboard on the wall glitched. His alias dropped off the list and reappeared as blocked. A cheer rose from a booth like they loved drama. He stared at the dead slot like a window slammed shut. I felt nothing triumphant, only the raw ache of cleanup. We are leaving, I said, steady. He followed with small stiff steps like a kid walking out of detention. At the doorway, the host called after us with a calm pitch. If you need resources, we partner with support groups. I paused for half a beat. Send the packet to the billing email on file. Her eyes flicked with surprise and then respect. Done. Outside, he sagged against a pillar and rubbed his temples. You embarrassed me. I didn't flinch. You abandoned us. He looked down and studied a crack in the concrete. For once, he didn't argue or improvise. Phones. I held my hand out without blinking. He placed it on my palm and stepped back. I turned on screen recording and opened the private messenger. We will message your top creator together. His shoulders jerked like I had hit him. I typed a short line without pleasantries. This account is compromised by compulsive spending. Do not accept future gifts. I added the blocked status screenshot and pressed send. 3 dots appeared instantly, then stopped, then appeared again. A reply popped with clipped phrasing. We comply with bans when verified. Please confirm from registered email. I opened his account's page and found the email address. He tried to turn away. I pivoted with him and kept typing. I sent the same message from the linked inbox with the attachments. A minute later, a final reply came in. Account barred for 60 days pending review. I exhaled through my nose and felt a small space open in my chest. 60 days isn't forever, but it's leverage. We walked to the curb in brittle silence. Ride home or separate places? He swallowed and glanced toward the main road. Home. He touched his pocket and found nothing there. I had everything that mattered. In the car, I set ground rules for the drive. No calls, no messages, one-word answers if needed. He nodded and looked out the window like scenery could absolve him. I stared straight ahead and counted intersections. At the apartment door, I paused with the key. Inside, then we audit. He winced and tried a joke that died mid-air. I opened the door and headed for the table. He followed with the posture of someone bracing for impact. I lined up devices like evidence and opened the wallet page. The balance sat low but not empty. Transaction history showed a new route through prepaid codes. Explain this pathway. He rubbed his knuckles and stared at his shoes. I learned it from a forum. I didn't push on the forum, I pushed on solutions. We install blocking software with admin rights on my account. He nodded slowly like his neck hurt. We add delays to any purchase attempt. He blinked twice and swallowed hard. When the installer asked for a recovery email, I typed my own. He didn't protest. When it asked for a master password, I used a phrase he wouldn't guess. He watched the progress bar fill and looked like someone watching a door lock on a cage he had built. Notification. S began to ping as the block scanned apps. It flagged the messenger and the hidden browser. It flagged the event site and 3 mirror links. Each one prompted a remove or allow. I hit remove with a calm finger every time. His chest rose and fell with shallow rhythm. I can't breathe. He paced once and gripped the edge of the chair. I pointed to the window and told him to stand there. He obeyed and inhaled slowly while I finished the sweep. Now the money. I opened the bank and created new sub-accounts. You get a small weekly budget while we rebuild trust. He nodded while biting the inside of his cheek. I moved the rest into a space he couldn't touch without me. The screen confirmed transfers and my shoulders dropped by degrees. I printed a 1-page contract with dates and consequences. He signed without bargaining. We added 2 names for accountability calls. He flinched when I said my sister's name and then accepted it. I initialed the bottom with a steady hand. Next step is a counselor appointment tomorrow afternoon. He looked up fast as if struck. I'll go. He rubbed his wrist again like that spot held a pulse for both of us. I watched for sincerity and found fatigue instead. Fatigue can be honest. He went to the kitchen and filled a glass slowly. I watched him choose water over escape. That tiny decision mattered in a way I felt in my ribs. He looked at me over the rim and didn't look away. Something old between us lifted its head. Sleep in the guest room tonight? He nodded and took a blanket from the shelf. No pleading, no performance. He closed the door gently like he understood the privilege of staying. I sat on the couch and counted quiet seconds until my lungs believed we were safe. At midnight, the software popped an alert on my phone. Attempted access blocked on a mirrored site. I stared at the timestamp and felt heat rise. I checked the guest room and found him awake with hands clenched. He saw my face and looked gutted. I didn't click. His voice came hoarse and flat. He held up the book he wasn't reading. The alert showed an automated refresh from an old widget. I watched shame flood his posture anyway. I believed the alert more than my anger. I cleared the widget and ran another scan. The dashboard reported clean status and a quiet log. He exhaled like someone quitting smoking on day 1. I stood in the doorway until his breathing slowed. I left the door open 2 inches and walked away. On the couch, I wrote a list for morning. Cancel the event membership. Call the partner program. Contact the bank fraud team to add additional filters. I added one final line I didn't want to write. Prepare a backup plan if he backslides. The sun dragged me out of a shallow doze. I brewed coffee and set 2 mugs out like a peace signal. He emerged with a rumpled t-shirt and tired eyes. He reached for a mug and paused before touching it. Thank you for not leaving last night. We aren't done. I slid 1 mug closer. Today we circle every exit and seal it. He nodded and reached for a pen to help. His hand steadied as the list grew longer and more precise. At 10, we called the partner program and requested a hard ban. The rep verified our documentation and activated it. They offered a digital resource kit and a contact for group meetings. I wrote down the schedule and handed it to him. He folded the paper with care and tucked it into his pocket. At noon, my sister buzzed to check in. I told her I had him home and contained. She offered her couch if anything shifted. I thanked her and kept my voice even. He listened without interrupting, and that earned a point. In the afternoon, we walked to the counselor's office together. He filled out the intake on a clipboard with steady script. I noticed when he paused at the question about compulsion. He marked the hardest option and didn't look at me. I felt both relief and a sharp sting. Inside the session, I asked for boundaries that protect me. He pressed his palms to his knees and agreed. The counselor guided us into concrete steps and weekly goals. I requested full transparency with money and devices. He requested grace when urges hit like weather. We left with a plan written in simple lines. He read it aloud in the hallway to prove he had it. I watched his mouth form each rule like a promise made to himself. He finished and looked at me with eyes that finally held. I nodded once to say I saw effort, not theater. Back at home, I gathered the last remaining gear and locked it in a storage trunk. He watched me carry it without flinching. Keep it out of sight. He lifted the lid as if checking a coffin. I shut it and turned the key with a click that felt final for now. Evening crept in with the weight of maintenance. We made dinner and split cleanup with automatic rhythm. He reached for me once and stopped midway. I let him stand in that restraint for a beat. Small discipline is still discipline. When night fell, I placed both phones in the drawer again. He watched the motion and nodded. "I'll ask if I need it." That sentence did something good to the atmosphere. We went to separate rooms without slam or sneer. I lay awake listening for the old patterns. No soft taps, no floorboard chorus, only the refrigerator cycling and a faucet drip. For the first time in weeks, I did not brace for a midnight scramble. I let my eyes close and kept one thought. Tomorrow could bring another ambush, and I'm ready. I grabbed the parcel from the lobby before he could reach it. The label used a fake name and our address. He froze halfway down the stairs with keys raised. I tore the strip and tipped the box. A slim visor slid into my palm like a loaded dare. "Return window S gone now?" He tried a casual tone and missed. I rotated the visor and found a sticker with a locker code. New gear, new route, same hunger. He stared at my hands like the device might leap. "Who bought this?" I kept my voice even and precise. He scratched his wrist and looked past me at the mailroom camera. Silence stretched until I tapped the sticker twice. He blinked hard and swallowed noise. I walked to the counter and opened the companion app. A guest profile sat empty and waiting. No history, no friends, a trial P. Riyadh counted down hours. He shifted his weight and checked the door like he needed wind. The timer kept blinking like a dare. "We're going upstairs." I pocketed the visor and the code. He followed with measured steps and quiet shoes. At the table, I set everything in a flat line. He stood behind a chair like he needed cover. "Unlock your cloud?" He hesitated, then entered his credentials. A device list loaded with 2 familiar entries and 1 new one. The new one used a generic model name with a star. I tapped it and pulled up yesterday's session length. 3 hours during my work call? My throat tightened, but my grip held. He rubbed his eyes and cursed under breath. I scrolled the session notes and froze at the tags. Couples zone, reward ladder, custom mode. My pulse found a cold rhythm. "Where?" He stared at the window and kept his jaw clenched. "Not here." He flinched as soon as he said it. I opened maps and checked recent Bluetooth logs. A pin glowed near the storage units 3 blocks away. He clenched his fists and waited for the blow. "We're going now." I picked up the visor and the locker code. He followed without protest and kept his eyes on the ground. At the entrance gate, a keypad waited for numbers. I typed the code and the lock released with a clean click. Inside the unit, a folding chair faced an old monitor. Receipts hung on a hook with rubber bands. A travel router blinked on a shelf. He reached for the power and stopped when I cleared my throat. I plugged the visor in and opened recent rooms. A session log showed a private link from a top creator. A second log showed 2-way audio and a tip trail. His alias had been replaced by a new handle. The handle matched the scratch card pattern from the market. He shuffled his feet and stared at the floor. "Any part of this legal?" I kept my tone dry and sharp. He shrugged with one shoulder and looked at the ceiling. "It's content." He tried to smile and failed. I clicked the link and watched a waiting room populate. A moderator avatar appeared with a clipboard icon. "Welcome back, you qualify for partner discounts." My throat went to ice. "Partner?" I shot him a look that stopped his breath. He shook his head fast and lifted his hands. "Are you producing?" The word tasted like ash. He stepped back and hit the shelf with his hip. "No." His eyes darted to the travel router and away. The waiting room loaded a compliance page with checkboxes. One box read Creator Revenue Share. I took a photo and opened the carrier app. I called to report unauthorized promotions tied to our address. The rep asked for proof and I sent 3 images. She escalated the case to the fraud team with a ticket number. I saved it and felt the ground steady by inches. "We're dismantling this." I pulled the router cord and pocketed the SIM. He wiped his face with both hands. I collected the receipts and slid them into an envelope. "Every passcode comes home." He nodded slowly and stared at the door. Back at the apartment, I spread the documents out like a map. A payout threshold sat close to clearing. Another $5 and he would have unlocked direct transfers. He noticed the number and went pale. I clicked the request payout button and recorded the error, account under review. His shoulders sagged and something raw passed through his face. For a second, I saw the fear under the compulsion. I didn't comfort it. I wrote a message to the platform with the ticket attached. I requested a permanent freeze on all accounts linked to our network. The reply came faster than I expected. Freeze applied for 90 days with continued monitoring. We will audit the creator invitation. I read the lines aloud and watched him absorb the math. 90 days means a season without that door. He paced once and pressed his palms to the table. I need help right now. That sentence rang different from every apology before. He put his phone on the table and pushed it to me. Lock it and keep the key. His voice shook, but the hands stayed steady. Fine. I turned on a stricter profile with 0 exceptions. I blocked the companion sites at the router level. I set a purchase request that had to ping me twice. He watched each step like a man watching stitches close. He didn't ask for a pause. I called the group line from the counselor's sheet. A volunteer answered with a crisp tone. I booked an emergency chair for this evening. I added my name as an observer for the first 10 minutes. He traced the rim of a cup and nodded at the time. Before we left, I checked the bank again. One old merchant tried to push a test charge, declined. I screen grabbed the alert and forwarded it to the fraud team. Then I wrote one message to my sister. If I text a single letter, you call. At the meeting, he sat in the first row and faced the floor. The leader asked for a first name and a goal. He lifted his head and gave both without flinching. When it was my turn, I kept it brief. I want a home where I am not an afterthought. The lead mapped triggers and exits on a whiteboard. He asked him to list one thing that numbs the urge. Push-ups. The room nodded and moved on. He exhaled and rolled his shoulders like the word itself brought weight. I felt a small thread of patience return. During the break, a man handed him a stack of chips used for milestones. He held one and stared like it might vanish. Day 1. The man clapped his shoulder, then walked away. My chest loosened one notch and stopped. We left with a schedule taped to his wallet. 3 nights a week, phone free from 9 to dawn, sponsor check-ins at noon. He agreed to each without drama. A quiet yes can be louder than any promise. On the sidewalk, my phone vibrated with an unknown number. The caller spoke quickly with a clipped accent. Someone attempted a password reset on your household account. We blocked it for now. I glanced at him and tightened my grip. He shook his head fast and lifted empty palms. Secure it, I answered with clear steps. The agent added a hardware key requirement and a voice passphrase. I tested both and logged the incident time. He watched everything and didn't touch his pockets. That restraint mattered. At home, he pulled out a notebook and wrote a list. Triggers, interventions, consequences. He read the words aloud under his breath. I stood across from him and added my own line. If you hide one device, you move out. He nodded without arguing. I hear you. He placed the notebook where we both could reach it. We set alarms for the nightly phone drop. He handed his over before the sound and looked at the drawer like it held oxygen. He turned away on purpose. At midnight, I woke to the building's door buzzer. He sat up too with a jolt. We looked at each other and then at the clock. He whispered one word like a plea, don't. I walked to the intercom and pressed speak. Who is it? Static? Then a woman's voice offered a delivery for the alias name. Wrong address. I hung up and leaned against the wall. He stood behind me with fists clenched and jaw tight. We both listened for footsteps in the hallway. No knock followed. The building went calm again. I wrote the time and the alias in our log. He poured water and drank with his eyes closed. I watched his throat work and kept my face unreadable. I did not say what I was thinking. Morning brought a message from the platform, creator inquiry resolved. The invitation had been triggered by engagement thresholds tied to multiple accounts. They flagged 6 accounts in our city for review. I sent a thank you and saved the case number. He read it and stared out the window like a person seeing weather break. I took out the storage trunk key and placed it on the counter. Decision time. He stared at the key and shook his head. Keep it. His voice almost disappeared on the second word. I slid the key back into my pocket and felt the shift land. We spent the day closing more small doors. He called his friend and canceled a shared subscription. I filed a report with the gift card hub and asked them to block similar purchases. He emailed HR to request flexible hours for group attendance. We stitched a routine with blunt thread. Late afternoon brought the hardest test. An email from an unknown domain offered a one-time code and a new room. The subject used his original alias in huge letters. I read it twice and showed him without commentary. He stared at it until tears formed and didn't fall. Delete it with me? He placed his hand on the mouse and I placed mine over his. We highlighted the message and dragged it to trash. We emptied the folder and watched the bar finish. His shoulders dropped an inch and then steadied. Dinner tasted like relief and cardboard. We talked about logistics, not feelings. He asked me to pick the meeting tomorrow and I nodded. He asked if he could walk alone after and I said no. I watched disappointment flare and then dissolve. He accepted the boundary without a fight. Night brought the drawer ritual again. He set his phone down and stepped back. I'll earn the right to touch it. The sentence sounded plain and real. I believed it for an hour and then reminded myself to check logs. Hope without verification used to be my weakness. Before sleep, I opened the notebook and added one more line. If 30 days pass clean, we revisit proximity. I left the page open where he could see it in the morning. I wanted him to wake with a measurable horizon. I also wanted him to know I would actually walk if he didn't try. In the dark, he whispered across the hallway, "Thank you for choosing to fight with me." I lay quiet and counted 4 breaths. I'm fighting for myself first. The words held steel and mercy. He didn't answer. The silence felt like a step forward and a cliff edge. I drifted with a plan ready for morning. Verify blocks, confirm bans, secure passwords again, then ask him to schedule one hard thing. Tell the group a secret you least want to share. I promised myself I would share one too. Sleep final. Why found me while the building rested? No taps, no alarms, no hidden pings, just the thin peace earned by a brutal day. I did not mistake it for safety. I woke to the buzz of an approval code pushing through silence. The drawer was closed and locked under my hand. He stood in the doorway with bare feet and a fixed stare. It wasn't me. His voice trembled like a wire about to snap. I unlocked the drawer and checked the history with slow breaths. The alert came from a new app masked as a utility. It tried to authorize a microcharge through a donation gateway. The request hit at 0301 then failed. My spine stiffened because someone was still probing. Show me your pockets? He turned them inside out with shaky hands. Empty. I scanned the router and found a foreign device pinging a handshake. The MAC address ended in 7C, which matched the travel hotspot number from storage. The unit had no power, but the echo remained. I grabbed my jacket and pointed to the door. We check the unit now. He followed me downstairs without arguing. The morning air bit hard and kept us moving. We reached the gate and I punched the code. The lock clicked like a throat clearing before a verdict. Inside, dust patterns told the truth better than words. The folding chair had shifted 2 inches toward the shelf. A cable hung loose that had been wrapped yesterday. I pressed the router button and nothing lit. I cracked the case and found a new SIM wedged under the board. My stomach went cold because someone had plans. Where did you get this card? He shook his head fast and stared at the concrete. I waited until answering would hurt more than denial. Which store? He swallowed and whispered the name of a kiosk near the station. I recognized it from the scratch card day and felt anger sharpen. We're done here. I tore the SIM and pocketed the pieces like evidence. He leaned against the doorframe and pinched the bridge of his nose. Sweat dotted his upper lip, though the air felt cruel. I wanted to throw every word I had. I chose 3. Pack your bag. He flinched like I had thrown a stone. Not forever. I kept my tone clean and final. Trial separation for 30 days starting now. He reached for my sleeve and stopped halfway like he had learned distance. We walked home without speaking because anything else would ignite. At the apartment, I opened the closet and set a small duffel on the chair. He folded shirts with jerky motions that showed panic. I watched his breath hitch at the 3rd drawer. He found the wedding photo and shut the drawer hard. Where do I go? He stood with the bag hanging off one hand. Your brother offered the spare room. I typed the address and handed him a card with the code. Group meetings continue daily and I will confirm attendance. His eyes reddened, but he didn't plead. I want a final check before you leave. I opened the laptop and ran the monitoring panel. No new installs, no hidden tunnels. The logs showed the 0301 attempt and nothing after. I printed the report because paper still feels heavier than pixels. He put on his jacket slowly like armor. I'm scared. He looked older and smaller in one glance. Good. I didn't sugarcoat the moment because clarity was mercy. Fear means your brain is waking up. At the door, he hesitated like he wanted permission to hug me. I stepped back and shook my head. Earn that later. He nodded once and tightened his grip on the handle. The door shut with a soft catch that felt like a gavel. I set a timer for 30 minutes and cleaned the table like a ritual. Then I called my sister and said one line, "It's happening now." She exhaled into the receiver and stayed quiet while I breathed. I hung up and stared at the storage trunk key. I walked the key to the sink and considered the drain. Throwing it away would feel righteous and reckless. I chose a safer burn. I put the key inside a sealed envelope and wrote a date, 90 days from now, review or destroy. At noon, the platform's trust team rang with an update. They found a cluster of accounts sharing routing patterns near our block. They asked if I had seen unfamiliar faces near our door. I remembered the midnight delivery voice and gave them the alias. Their tone shifted from routine to urgent. I forwarded the call summary to our bank contact. She replied with a list of vendors whose codes needed extra blocking. I added everyone to our profile and raised the friction. Orders would take 24 hours to clear. That delay might save us twice. By early afternoon, my phone flashed his sponsor's name. He checked in on time and stayed for the hour. The man kept his voice crisp and grounded. He cried halfway through and then sat upright. I thanked him and felt my jaw relax a fraction. Small verifications kept me from drowning. I bought a cheap prepaid just for verifications and set it beside the couch. I programmed rules for pings and code words. If a stranger arrived with a package, I would record and decline. If a Burr repeated 3 times, I would pick up with the call record on. I built a perimeter one click at a time. At 5, he texted a picture of the meeting chip and a crumpled schedule. He wrote 3 words I had not seen from him yet, asked for help. I stared at the screen until my eyes blurred, then cleared. I typed back 1 syllable that held both steel and kindness. Good. Dusk crawled over the block and the unmarked messages started again. New room unlocked for loyal friends. Tap to confirm age. The subject lines used his first alias and the new one side by side. I forwarded each to the case thread and dragged them to junk. Then I set a rule to forward anything related to law enforcement contacts if it crossed a threshold. My sister called again and asked if I wanted company. I said no and yes in the same breath. Come for an hour, then head home. She arrived fast with no questions in her eyes. We sat on the floor and made a safety plan out loud like we were packing for a storm. When she left, I walked the apartment and checked doors. I opened the drawer and looked at the 2 phones sleeping. For a split second, I wanted to smash them both and live with silence. Instead, I closed the drawer and chose vigilance over noise. The next morning broke like an alarm inside my chest. I went to work and told my boss I needed mornings for calls this week. He nodded and said, "Handle your life." That kindness almost knocked me over. I used the time to fill out forms with the counselor and confirm the next sessions. At noon, I met him at a coffee place across from the group center. He wore the same jacket and a thin resolve. He made eye contact and kept it without flinching. I placed a simple list on the table and slid it toward him. He read each line and exhaled like he had been holding breath all morning. "Read the last line aloud." He cleared his throat and obeyed. "If I violate any boundary twice in a week, I leave for 6 months. His lips shook on the final word, but he finished. I reached out and tapped the period with my finger. He nodded once like he felt the weight. We walked to the counselor's office together and took notepads. She asked him to write a disclosure for me in bullets. He wrote fast like the truth wanted out. Spending totals, secret accounts, nights he lied about traffic. My hand clenched and then relaxed with each point landing like a brick. She asked me to write what I needed for trust to grow. I wrote 5 items and surprised myself with number 4. Small joy together weekly without devices. I looked at the line for a long beat. Wanting anything tender made me feel exposed and stubborn. He noticed the line and glanced at my face. "I will plan the first one under your rules." He sat up straighter as if an assignment felt like oxygen. The counselor marked a date and we both screenshotted the calendar. Structure can be a life raft when the water stays rough. We left the office and walked in separate directions for 5 minutes. I needed space to think without performance. He needed to sit with himself and not run. We met at the corner again and something had changed in his posture. Less slack, more decision. Back home, I checked the mailbox and found a padded envelope. The return address was blank and the handwriting forced. I held it up to the camera and recorded as I opened it. Inside lay a branded wristband with a QR code. The card invited the wearer to skip queues as a veteran supporter. I took photos from every angle and dropped the wristband into a sealed bag. Then I emailed the case officer with a subject that did not hide my anger. Someone is escalating contact to our residence. Her reply arrived in 4 minutes. A detective would be looped in and the upstream payment switches consulted. That evening, the building's intercom buzzed again. I did not touch it. I watched the panel until the light stopped. Then I checked the hallway camera feed on my tablet. A person in a hoodie stood at the mailboxes and then left a small envelope under our door. I waited 30 seconds, then opened the door with the recorder on. The envelope contained a printout of his alias profile with a new announcement. Final private show before hiatus. Tonight only. Codes included for old friends. I stood a long time reading that headline and felt something inside me harden beyond repair. I sent everything to the detective and then texted him 3 words. Do not move. He arrived 15 minutes later with shoulders squared. I handed him the printout and watched his face drain. He put both hands on the wall and held himself there. He didn't cry. He didn't argue. He just breathed and listened like a soldier hearing orders. We make our own broadcast tonight? I placed the notebook on the table and drew a line down the middle. On the left, I wrote their invite. On the right, I wrote our plan. He watched the columns appear with his jaw clenched and his eyes steady. Step 1, record an accountability video to the group. Step 2, share the wrist band image and the door envelope with the detective. Step 3, invite 2 group members to call at the risky hour. Step 4, sit with me on the couch while the window passes. He agreed to each item without hedging. At 9 sharp, he held up his phone and recorded a 30-second promise. No drama, no excuses. He named the hour and the urge and the replacement. Then he sent it to the group chat and marked it urgent. Within minutes, 2 members replied with thumbs and their incoming call times. We sat on the couch facing the locked drawer like a chess board. The first call came at 9:15 and lasted 10 minutes. They asked him for his heart rate and his plan for the next 30 seconds. He answered both without stalling. When the call ended, he put his head in his hands and exhaled hard. At 9:30, the second call came with a new face. A woman spoke like a coach before a sprint. She asked him to stand and do 10 squats and count out loud. He did, and his voice steadied by the 7th. She hung up with a promise to ring again at 9:50. The detective texted at 9:40. Payment switch confirms a coordinated push on vulnerable accounts. Stay reachable. I replied with our plan and the wristband photos. Then I looked at the drawer and then at his hands. He kept them on his knees with fingers open and still. 9:50 arrived and the coach called again. She asked me to take the phone and speak 1 sentence. I said it clear and slow for both of us. We stay in the room and we stay in the light. He closed his eyes and nodded once. The line clicked off and left us with our breathing. 10 o'clock passed without a knock or a ping. He stared at the ceiling and let tears roll finally. I didn't move closer, though my chest hurt. I watched him fall apart in a quiet way that had nothing to do with pity. It looked like surrender to reality, not to me. I stood and fetched the envelope with the wristband. I held it over the trash and paused. Destroying it would feel satisfying and stupid. I placed it in the storage trunk and locked the lid instead. Evidence keeps predators honest. At 10:15, he spoke without lifting his head. I choose us. The words landed with weight but not fireworks. He wiped his eyes with his sleeve and sat up. I believed him enough to make the next move clean. You sleep here tonight on the couch? He nodded and grabbed the extra blanket from the shelf. Tomorrow we talk to the detective together. He folded the blanket once with deliberate care. Next week we review progress and decide if I come home full-time. He lay down and stared at the ceiling again with steady breaths. I watched for twitchy fingers and furtive glances and saw none. I turned off the lamp and left the hallway light on. I closed my door, but not all the way. The crack of space felt like a truce line. I woke early and checked the logs before coffee. No alerts, no failed attempts, no backdoor pings. I set the phones on the table and just looked at them, tools or traps depending on the hands holding them. He stirred and sat up with messy hair and clear eyes. He made 2 cups and set one near my elbow with a soft push. Thank you for staying in the room. He watched my face for any signal. I gave him one. We are not fixed. I kept the words short and true, but we fought something ugly and won last night. He nodded and inhaled like it hurt. I want to do that again when it counts. We met the detective in a small office and laid out the evidence. She listened without judgment and took clean notes. She asked him to explain the network of invites and he did without spin. She promised to push the case to the cyber unit and withheld promises about arrests. I liked her immediately because she didn't sell comfort. Afterward, we walked outside and stood under the open sky. He reached into his pocket and pulled out the meeting chip. He placed it in my hand without a speech. I turned it between my fingers and kept my face steady. Tokens are nothing without choices that match them. We crossed the street in silence and headed toward home. He touched my shoulder lightly, then pulled back. I let his hand fall without grabbing it. The space wasn't punishment anymore, it was training. At the door, I paused with the key in my palm. "I'll give you a drawer in the hallway for your things." He exhaled and nodded with his head low. "We'll revisit at 30 days with facts, not feelings." He straightened a little like a runner at the blocks. Inside, we moved through motions that felt less like panic and more like practice. Phones in the drawer, notes on the board, calls scheduled, food on plates, time marked on the calendar with simple numbers that meant survival. That night, he looked at the couch and then at me. "Can I read here while you sleep?" I weighed the question and nodded. "Leave the hall light on." He smiled small and meant it. I closed my door and leaned against it for a long breath. Sleep came slow, and then all at once, I dreamed of our rooms with visible exits and doors that answered to my hand. I woke before dawn and listened. No buzzing, no footsteps, no whispered code, only a rhythm of two people learning how to share air without choking on it. I stepped into the hall and found him awake with the notebook open. He had written a short line across the top like a prayer. "Today I pick truth over numb." He looked up and waited for me to speak. I chose the next right sentence and let it carry us forward. "Make coffee and schedule the noon call." He stood and moved quickly with no side glances. I watched him go and felt something quiet unlock in my chest. Not trust, not yet, but a door slightly open to possibility, which is enough for now.